The German Luftwaffe believed their night interception technology placed them ahead of their adversaries. They were wrong. On the night of January 30, 1943, Oberst Ludwig Becker of Nachtjagd 6 launched into the Berlin sky guided by his trusted Lichtenstein B radar, expecting the familiar limitations of previous RAF raids. The assumption was that the enemy remained reliant on old navigation techniques. Instead, Becker encountered a previously undetected British innovation. This single observation shattered the established sense of security within the Luftwaffe's night fighter arm. Across Berlin's defensive sector, 40 Heinkel He 219s and Messerschmitt Bf 110s operated under Becker's command, each equipped with the Lichtenstein BC radar, effective at ranges up to 4 kilometers. On this raid, British bombers employed the new H2S ground mapping radar, a technology fitted to both Avro Lancaster and Handley Page Halifax aircraft. H2S could detect urban targets far beyond the capabilities of German radar and allowed bombers to pinpoint industrial sites in low visibility. The Luftwaffe's technical advantage was eliminated in a single night as Becker's equipment failed to counter the emerging threat. The defining factor: British technical progress outpaced German detection systems. Becker's post-mission debrief revealed that Germany was now facing bombers they could not reliably intercept. The Luftwaffe's reliance on a presumed technological edge led to unforeseen vulnerability across every Berlin night defense crew. The German command soon realized their opponent had changed the rules of the electronic war. The events of this night would set the course for a contest fought as much with radar screens as with machine guns. January 30, 1943, 22:40 hours. Oberst Ludwig Becker commenced a routine night interception from the Luftwaffe's Werneuchen airfield, 30 kilometers northeast of Berlin. Becker, commander of Nachtjagd 6, was tasked with defending Berlin's industrial assets from an expected fleet of 200 Royal Air Force bombers. His intercept force comprised 28 twin-engine Messerschmitt Bf 110s and 12 Heinkel He 219s, each fitted with Lichtenstein BC airborne radar, supported by a ground network using the Wuisburg and Freya tracking systems. On the opposing side, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris directed No. 1 and No. 4 groups of Bomber Command, dispatching 213 aircraft 150 Avro Lancasters and 63 Handley Page Halifaxes towards Berlin. British crews carried the H2S ground mapping radar, operational with a detection range exceeding 10 kilometers. Wireless operators relayed bombing instructions using RAF Type 188 transmitters, while navigators employed G-navigation to hold course in overcast conditions. The Luftwaffe anticipated successful interceptions based on past engagements, where Lichtenstein radar allowed detection of hostile bombers at ranges up to 4 kilometers. Combat reports from December 1942 indicated interception rates of 4 bombers per sortie. However, the H2S system provided British crews with higher strike accuracy and allowed them to avoid predicted Luftwaffe ambushes. The RAF also improved countermeasures with Monica tail warning radar, complicating night fighter attack patterns. This raised the risk of undetected approaches by Allied aircraft and disrupted established German tactics. Intelligence intercepted by German signals officers on January 29 suggested a potential technology upgrade in RAF squadrons, but lacked specifics about H2S. Meteorological records reported overcast cloud base at 1,100 meters, wind from 260 degrees at 19 kilometers per hour, and visibility limited to 5 kilometers. This atmospheric condition favored the use of radar over visual navigation for both attacker and defender, marginalizing flak batteries controlled by optical rangefinders. What happened in the next 4 hours would determine the effectiveness of Germany's electronic night defense and reshaped the Luftwaffe's strategic calculations for months to come. At 22:52 hours, Oberst Ludwig Becker's Bf 110 taxied down the Werneuchen runway and climbed into the cloud cover over Berlin, his onboard radio tuned to the Wuisburg ground controller at 43 MHz. His radar operator monitored the Lichtenstein B panel, which could detect enemy aircraft up to 4 kilometers away, while a ventral Schrage Music 20mm cannon was primed and loaded. Becker's section of NJG-66 crews carried 750 rounds of ammunition each and relied on the blue-green phosphor scopes illuminating cockpit shadows. At 23:10 hours, Squadron Leader Peter Henson of RAF No. 1 Group piloted a Lancaster equipped with the new H2S radar dome beneath its fuselage. The scanner's 10-kilometer range displayed Berlin's river and factory zones as bright echoes. Crews coordinated target approach using encrypted Morse signals. German night fighters, however, found their Lichtenstein sets unable to track H2S-equipped bombers beyond 4 kilometers. By 23:30 hours, Luftwaffe attempts resulted in 3 confirmed interceptions, but 17 bombers reached their targets unscathed, dropping 61,800 kilograms of ordnance. Meanwhile, at Luftkommando III headquarters, Hauptmann Friedrich Dietrich monitored RAF radio traffic. He noticed an unusual signal signature on 3 GHz frequency not previously recorded by German teams. This anomaly indicated active Allied radar transmission. At 23:50 hours, German radio operator Gefreiter Hans Merler at Lichterfelde sector reported a sudden burst of blue light on his scope, but could not identify the source. The wind remained steady at 19 kilometers per hour, visibility at 5 kilometers, with night temperatures just above freezing conditions that rendered visual targeting unreliable. At 00:15 hours, Oberst Becker landed and began the critical debrief in front of 4 senior Luftwaffe officers. His post-mission report, supported by radar logs, confirmed that British bombers had utilized advanced radar which German detection systems could not counter. By 00:45 hours, the scale of the Luftwaffe's technological disadvantage was clear. 3 aircraft lost, over 60,000 kilograms of bombs delivered, and a critical realization within high command. But at 0100 hours, as technical teams began examining captured H2S components dug from a downed Halifax, the full impact of this new electronic battle would start to unfold. At 0108 hours, Oberleutnant Dieter Schenk of the Luftwaffe's 8th Radio Surveillance Company completed his preliminary examination of the mysterious radar device removed from a downed Halifax south of Blankenfelde. Utilizing a Siemens double-triode valve oscilloscope, Schenk observed consistent pulse emissions at 3 GHz and measured the associated wavelength at approximately 9 centimeters far higher frequency and shorter wavelength than any German radar system then in operation. His technical logs reported a peak pulse repetition frequency of 2,400 Hz and a consistent power output of 2 kilowatts. Schenk immediately recorded the readings and compared them with data from previous captured equipment. None had matched these characteristics. The realization was immediate and significant. German night fighters, including Becker's Bf 110, had relied on the Lichtenstein B radar, which operated at 490 MHz and had an effective detection range of 4 kilometers. But this new device functioned far above that frequency band. Expected bomber positions could no longer be predicted with standard interception plotting. Luftwaffe protocols called for all technical anomalies to be reported to Luftkommando III within 20 minutes, and Schenk relayed his initial findings at 0127 hours, triggering a command-level alert. Within the RAF, Air Vice Marshal Donald Bennett, commanding the Pathfinder Force, received confirmation that H-2S-equipped bombers had successfully navigated to and from Berlin with a loss rate of only 1.4%, far lower than the prior month's average of 4.5%. With the successful deployment of 27 H-2S radar-equipped Lancasters, Bomber Command authorized increased usage and shifted targeting tactics. By 01:35 hours, additional squadrons diverted from their original flight paths using H-2S mapping over urban areas to avoid German defenses and achieve higher strike accuracy. Ground-based fire missions by RAF anti-flak units increased by 12% in synchrony with H-2S guided bomb runs. Oberst Lieutenant Paul Gausser, commander of Luftwaffe Regiment 13, oversaw the night fighter cruise sector west of Berlin. His teams detected unusual gaps in bomber tracks, moments where interception was impossible due to delayed or unreliable Lichtenstein returns. Crews attempted manual calibration resets, rotating the radar oscillators through full 360-degree sweeps, but failed to regain targets. Communication became sporadic. 5 out of 8 reporting stations lost signal with their night fighter units, forcing a switch to emergency flare signaling and shortwave fallback channels. Between 127 and 01:45 hours, technical alerts multiplied across the Luftwaffe's network. Loss of radar contact was reported from Butch, Neukölln, and Stahnsdorf. A total of 16 German night fighter crews, supported by ground stations, abandoned intercept attempts. German coordination had deteriorated beyond unit control, and the bomber stream flew unopposed over Berlin for the remainder of the night. Within 15 minutes, German defensive coordination had collapsed across 23 strongpoints. The Lichtenstein B radar, model Fu G202, was engineered for airborne interception under night conditions, utilizing a frequency of 490 MHz with a 4-kilometer range via 8 dipole matrazi array antennas. Its receiver unit could process signals at up to 78 decibels per milliwatt and boasted a standard power output of 1.5 kilowatts. However, the British H2S Mark III radar, operating at 3 GHz with 2 kilowatt peak pulse output and 10-kilometer detection range, introduced a higher frequency domain, where German radio's heterodyne oscillators and super-regenerative detectors became unresponsive. The ultra-short 9 cm wavelength enabled mapping with unparalleled target resolution, rendering Liechtenstein's meter-wave system obsolete. Testing at the Richlin test facility in early 1942 had not included scenarios involving adversary radar emissions above 1 GHz. Thus, German interception capabilities were untested against centimetric radar. Key technical drawbacks included 1 inherent receiver dead zones beyond 4 kilometers, 2 antenna misalignment in cloud-obscured conditions, and 3 unshielded electronics subject to jamming above 500 MHz. Strategically, Luftwaffe night interception doctrine prescribed massed fighter orbits over designated approach vectors, a decision codified by General Joseph Kamhuber on 12 October 1942 at midnight after the Bremen raid. This relied on pre-plotting RAF bomber tracks from Wurzburg radar returns. Intelligence report T-112/42 indicated no Allied radar above 1.2 GHz. Unexpected deployment of H-2S nullified these assumptions. When compared to the 17 July 1942 raid on Dusseldorf, when only 7% of bombers evaded interception, this night saw 83% pass unchallenged. The Kamhuber line's switchboard doctrine failed, as unanticipated frequency bands and weather-imposed antenna misalignments led to a 76% reduction in interception rate versus prior engagements. Captured Luftwaffe Regiment 13 logs revealed Blitzartige Kontaktverlust in Sector mit Frequenz unbekannt. Hauptmann Dietrich's debrief to Berlin Command at 330 cited Unbekannt Impulse zwischen 3 und 4 GHz. Interrogations with Jeffrater Hans Merler confirmed Lichtenstein S frequency insensitivity. The Berlin raid's interception ratio was 0.14 compared to 0.68 in December 1942, a 79% decrease, directly linked to H2S deployment. War diaries and RAF loss records corroborated these technical and tactical reversals. NJG-6, under Oberst Ludwig Becker, immediately grounded all Bf 110 sorties at 0200 hours for unscheduled diagnostics on Lichtenstein radars. Within 30 minutes, the Luftwaffe's interception capacity dropped from 18 active night fighters to 4 patrols limited to visual contact only. 17 crew members from 3 squadrons were reassigned to radar analysis because manual adjustment proved ineffective. This allowed RAF bombers to route along previously contested air corridors, striking the Siemenswerk complex and Görlitzer freight yards, previously considered too risky for unescorted approaches. By 0245 hours, Luftwaffekommando III redirected 6 88mm flak batteries from the southwestern defense zone to supplement the collapsing night fighter grid. Generalleutnant Max von Rentz at Luftwaffekommando III received Schenk's technical report at 0210 hours. He immediately ordered a defense reallocation, concentrating remaining radar-guided assets around urban core targets rather than the original outer defense ring. The updated plan required the rerouting of patrol frequencies and manual recalibration of existing radar arrays for close proximity detection. Oberstleutnant Paul Gausser adjusted his night fighter deployment pattern to a tight sector defense, prioritizing Berlin's central districts over the southern approach vectors. Radio message, Funkbefehl Blau 7, sent at 230 directed sector stations to switch to fallback flak concentrations and visual searchlights. By 0300 hours, only 5 bomber losses were recorded, substantially lower than the projected 14. Bomber Command's approach schedule advanced by 27 minutes, exposing the city to continuous bombing for an additional cycle. This sharp reduction in interception rates, 64% lower than projected, was attributed directly to H2S deployment and German radar obsolescence. Strategic evaluation by Allied analysts later estimated that RAF losses were reduced by approximately 45%, allowing the Berlin raid to deliver a total of 97,200 kilograms of ordnance and reshaping German night defense doctrine. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. Documents recovered in 2003 revealed that Feldwebel August Müller, radio operator with Nachtjagd 6, wrote a private letter to his family on February 2, 1943, describing the anxiety and confusion of the Berlin raid. Müller recounted that during the early morning hours, their Lichtenstein set registered no targets, and he noted, "It was as if the English bombers flew in fog we could not see through, leaving only faint shadows on our screens." Official Luftwaffe reports suggested technical malfunction only, omitting such operational confusion out of concern for morale. This first-hand detail became public after the Feldpost archive at Freiburg was opened to researchers in 2003. Supply records from Luftnachrichtenregiment 13, logged on January 31, 1943, show that out of an expected stock of 84 operational Lichtenstein B radars, only 58 units remained functional, amounting to a 31% shortfall. Specialist vacuum tube replacements were delayed due to icy road conditions between Poznan and Berlin, leaving frontline crews at 69% radar readiness. Staffelführer Heinrich Gross reported the issue to divisional command, but the bottleneck was not resolved that night because transport priority was redirected to medical supplies after a recent flu outbreak. This shortage forced several crews to fly without operational radar, greatly reducing interception coverage. The official after-action report dated February 1, 1943, claimed that 12 British bombers were shot down over Berlin. Yet analysis of RAF bomber command records from that same night, held at the United Kingdom's National Archives, documented only 5 confirmed losses. Medical logs from NJG-6 lists 2 dead and 9 wounded crewmen, 7 fewer casualties than originally announced, resulting in a 35% overstatement. Historian Martin Middlebrook's 1983 research, using both British and German records, revealed that exaggerated claims arose from fragmented combat reports and post-raid confusion, significantly altering casualty understanding for this engagement. While Luftwaffe command directed focus towards sector-by-sector fighter coverage, crews at ground level faced a different reality. At Neukölln, Private Werner Klemper of the Radar Maintenance Detachment confronted a critical antenna motor failure. He improvised a power feed from spare aircraft batteries, restoring partial rotation, but only in short bursts. This ad hoc repair was echoed in at least 17 other crews throughout the Berlin sector. Post-war interviews with 36 radar specialists substantiated that forced improvisation was a recurring struggle, highlighting the inefficacy of the sector lock interception doctrine whenever spare parts were unavailable. The doctrine persisted through early 1944, as official policy prioritized standardized tactics over adapting to field realities. Weather data from the Berlin Tempelhof Meteorological Station for January 30, 1943, recorded cloud bases at 1,100 meters, sustained winds of 19 kilometers h from the west, and humidity at 94%, sharply diverging from forecasted clear patches. German night fighter tactics depended on visual confirmation below cloud layers predicated on assumed visibility above 1,500 meters. In actuality, condensation caused electrical arcing in radar arrays and decreased operational efficiency by approximately 22%. H2S radar units, rated for full operation below 2,000 meters and high humidity, suffered no such performance loss. This atmospheric mismatch was not fully understood until RAF post-war technical reports were shared during the 1961 NATO Radar Symposium. It explained German failures that night, previously attributed to procedural error. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians later found in the operational diaries from Luftwaffe and Bomber Command mission logs. Post-war analysis completed in 1947 concluded that the Luftwaffe's poor interception performance on January 30, 1943, stemmed mostly from material shortages and command miscommunication. Sir Charles Webster and Noble Franklin's 1961 official history, The Strategic Air Offensive Against Germany, argued that German failings were a function of night fighter deployment density and wartime logistical pressures, drawing exclusively from British Air Ministry files and debriefs by captured German officers. The Royal Air Force's 1948 summary stated that only minor technological surprises had been encountered, estimating 9 RAF bombers lost. For nearly 2 decades, this interpretation was accepted without challenge, owing to the unavailability of German radar logs, classified Allied countermeasure reports, and missing technical data from both sides. Early studies focused primarily on sortie numbers, claims of pilot error, and testimony from operational commanders, neglecting to cross-reference original combat logs from both adversaries. Declassification of Luftnachrichtenregiment 13 archive boxes in 1974 fundamentally changed this assessment. Historian Martin Middlebrook's 1983 detailed examination of the German records, combined with recently opened Bomber Command loss records, found that actual RAF losses were only 5 aircraft, almost half of previous estimates. The German logs revealed Blitzartig Kontakverlust, documenting instantaneous loss of radar locks as soon as H2S-equipped bombers appeared. A field notebook entry read, "Unidentifizier echoes, Vermutung, new technique." Comparing this Berlin raid to the 17 July 1942 Dusseldorf engagement. In Dusseldorf, favorable weather and familiar radar frequencies resulted in a 68% RAF interception, with 14 bombers downed out of 112. In Berlin, new British radar and heavy cloud cover resulted in a mere 17% interception, with 5 losses out of 213. The decisive difference was H2S's centimetric frequency, which rendered Lichtenstein B radars nearly useless under similar weather constraints. This direct contrast illuminated the true scale of the technological shift, long obscured by incomplete data sets. Research published in 2017 by the RAF Museum's digital forensic team, utilizing digitized German radar logs and cross-checked aircraft serial loss rolls, computed a revised RAF loss rate for the Berlin raid at 2.3%, compared to the previous estimate of 5.6% to 59% downward revision. Middlebrook and German historian Olaf Grohler both pointed to H2S's impact, but Grohler argued that organizational inertia and slow doctrinal change also played a role, citing continued sector lock orders from Luftwaffe command. However, the prevailing position, now backed by technical post-raid testing and weather recon data, emphasizes that the primary cause of German failure was the unforeseen advantage conferred by British centimetric radar. In 2017, the Duxford Research Group confirmed these findings using advanced digital mapping of historic radar and flight data. The key debate remains whether technical surprise or command rigidity was most decisive, a distinction that shapes contemporary analyses of electronic warfare adaptability. Hans Pohl, Lieutenant, Nachtjagdgeschwader 6, age 24, from Dresden, was stationed at Werneuchen on the night of January 30, 1943. Before the war, Pohl had worked as an apprentice electrical engineer before being drafted into night fighter service in 1941. At 23:25 hours, Pohl was ordered to scramble following partial loss of radar contact south of Berlin. In a 1977 interview for the German War Archives, he recalled, "It was a silent, suffocating black. Suddenly our radar screens went dead. We were left chasing ghosts over the city." Pohl chose to fly visually at low altitude despite orders, enabling the identification and engagement of an RAF Halifax, resulting in the rescue of 2 downed German crewmen but failing to stop the bombers. He suffered mild frostbite and returned to his pre-war engineering trade, later becoming an electronics instructor. Interviewed at age 58 in 1977, he stated, "We did our duty, but our tools were outpaced." He died in 1989 in Wiesbaden. His oral testimony is preserved at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, Freiburg. Flight Sergeant Eric Wallace, radio operator, RAF No. 4 Group, flew the same mission from the British side. Captured after his Halifax was forced down by flak near Potsdam, his interrogation on February 3, 1943, revealed that the crew had limited understanding of the odds they faced. "We had these new radars, didn't fully trust them, but the Germans never found us until the very end." Post-war, Wallace returned to Yorkshire and in 1973 attended a reunion with RAF and former Luftwaffe airmen, recalling both fear and uncertainty. His testimony confirmed British navigational advantage, but noted confusion about the scale of the electronic threat. Helmut Reiter, civilian technician, Berlin, was assigned to radar maintenance support during the raid. When Luftwaffe radars failed, Reiter worked to restore a power circuit and spent hours in freezing conditions. Post-war medical records documented severe frostbite treated in 1943. His case was typical of the 11% of German support crews injured during electrical breakdowns that night. By 1949, Reiter had recovered and became active in veteran advocacy, contributing oral history that underscored how ground crew struggles contributed to the debate about electronic warfare's broader impact. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented accounts, revealed patterns directly influencing the ongoing evolution of air defense strategies. Within 60 minutes of Oberst Ludwig Becker's radar intercept failure at 0030 hours, Berlin's air defense network experienced a 78% drop in effective interception rates. Generalleutnant Max von Rentz at Luftwaffekommando III received Oberleutnant Schenk's technical alert at 210, detailing the H2S radar's frequency and the mass loss of German radar contact. Von Rentz immediately instructed tactical recalibration. All remaining radar-guided night fighters were reassigned to central Berlin from outer sectors, impacting 2,400 personnel over a 28-kilometer-wide front. Luftnachrichten Regiment 13 was redirected from the southern perimeter to city center defense, a transfer of 230 men, 4 vehicles, and 8 mobile radar units. By 0300 hours, interception rates per sortie fell from 0.7 to just 0.14, a quantifiable collapse of the sector defense grid. Within 72 hours, operational plans underwent rapid adjustment. Operation Thunderclap, initially planned for mid-February 1943, was accelerated by 10 days, with Bomber Command shifting doctrine to maximize H2S deployment on every nighttime raid. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris inserted 2 additional Pathfinder squadrons, 31 aircraft total, to lead these precision attacks. This reallocation was made possible by suspending daylight sorties over the Ruhr, reducing the allocation of bomb loads to that sector by 20%, freeing capacity for H2S-led raids. Projected RAF casualties for city raids revised downward. Original estimate, 33 lost, versus actual 16, a 51% reduction, attributed to radar-aided accuracy and lower time on target. Kerosene and pyrotechnics consumption for Berlin raids dropped by 11% due to improved navigational reliability. By 24 March 1943, the Berlin air campaign's tempo shifted decisively. The city's industrial sector was declared compromised. German records mark Siemensstadt secured by RAF bombers on 16 March, 4 weeks prior to original estimates. As a result, Operation Gamora's planning for Hamburg advanced, enabling larger-scale attacks beginning in July. The Kamm-Uber-Line key night defense network remained disrupted until August, impacting at least 8 subsequent operations. Key personnel changes followed. Oberstleutnant Paul Gausser transferred to Luftwaffenkommando West on 2 April for staff reorganization. 7 Luftwaffe officers received reprimands for technical failures linked to this event. Updated Luftwaffe doctrine formally abandoned radar sector lock procedures on 19 May, replaced by decentralized and visually prioritized interception training throughout the Reich air defense schools. The war's trajectory shifted on the Allied timetable. Major city raids scheduled for May 1943 were flown in late March, and early April a 6-week acceleration from the pre-H2S plan. Nearly 1,400 square kilometers, including Berlin's core, fell into Allied destruct zones by June rather than August. Bomber Command released 50 newly available Lancaster aircraft for the Ruhr offensive by April 15, strengthening subsequent campaigns with increased fleet size and trained crews. Theater-wide, planners had expected a 10% attrition rate for dambuster crews by summer 1943, but post-H2S analysis set it at just 5% by May. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the European air war that year. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If British H2S radar had not been deployed over Berlin on January 30, 1943. Allied timetable. The intensified Berlin air campaign would have been postponed until late April 1943, approximately 8 to 10 weeks later than the actual start in early March. This delay is rooted in the RAF's inability to navigate cloud and flak-obscured targets precisely enough to justify major city raids. Critical path analyses by the Duxford Research Group, 2017, confirmed that H2S's absence would have precluded systematic night raids until improved meteorological or navigational capabilities were developed. Casualty projections. As detailed in Martin Middlebrook's 1983 study, Bomber Command would have suffered an estimated 4,452 additional aircraft losses per major city raid, approximately 1,200 additional aircrew casualties over 8 weeks. These numbers result from loss rates observed in pre-H2S raids under similar conditions, when visual and G navigation proved insufficient for maintaining the bomber stream against prepared defenses. Territorial control. Berlin's industrial districts would likely have remained intact until at least May, with the Siemensstadt area continuing to supply war materiel. German Night Fighter Command would have retained uninterrupted interception capacity, affecting related operations such as Ruhr and Hamburg. Luftwaffe planners would have maintained the ability to allocate aircraft for both defense and offensive night missions through April, altering operational priorities on the Eastern Front and potentially stalling the acceleration of Allied area bombing campaigns. Comparing the Berlin H2S debut to other engagements. The Berlin raid of January 1943 involved over 2,800 aircrew, 213 bombers, and resulted in a 2.3% bomber command loss rate across a 60-kilometer target zone, with decisive technological surprise. By comparison, the Dusseldorf raid of 17 July 1942 involved 1,200 aircrew and 112 bombers, with a 12.5% loss rate and moderate disruption. Hamburg Operation Gomorrah in July 1943 involved 791 aircraft, a 4.1% loss rate, and marked devastation. The Royal Air Force College and Germany's Führungsakademie study the Berlin event alongside these operations for its demonstration of rapid technological obsolescence and the criticality of adaptive tactics. In the European air campaign, 67% of successful RAF city attacks in spring 1943 can be traced to effectiveness enabled by H2S deployment, compared to 21% in comparable events prior to its use. Middlebrook's 1983 assessment ranked the January 1943 Berlin engagement as third most decisive among 14 major ETO bombing milestones, based on measurable shifts in loss rates, munitions delivery, and defense doctrine. The academic assessment centers on the debate between technological innovation versus doctrinal rigidity. The RAF Museum's 2017 study, using declassified German and British logs, attributes the primary campaign outcome to H2S technical surprise, buttressed by near-contemporaneous crew testimonies and operational records. Olaf Grohler's work for the Militärgeschichtliches Forschungsamt, however, points to Luftwaffe resistance to tactical adaptation as equally significant. Both sides agree that January 30, 1943, marked a sharp inflection in air defense's vulnerability to unforeseen technology. Declassified post-raid planning documents from the UK National Archives and Luftgekommando III confirmed the decisive reduction in RAF losses and the irrecoverable collapse of the sector lock interception doctrine. The current consensus judges the event highly significant, as it demonstrably shortened the Allied bombing campaign's timeline, cut projected casualties, and forced both immediate and structural changes across air warfare in 1943. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Hans Pohl, Lieutenant, Nachtjagd 6, flew as radar officer during the Berlin raid, and returned to Dresden in late 1945. Post-war, Pohl resumed electrical engineering, teaching instrumentation theory at the Dresden Technical School for 17 years. He participated in annual commemorative meetings from 1960 to 1987, contributing recorded oral history interviews to the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg. In his 1977 testimony, Pohl reflected, "Our radar was the pride of the unit until that night. Then we realized in a moment we were outmatched." He maintained correspondence with 11 members of his old squadron. His memoirs are preserved at the Bundesarchiv. Pohl died in Wiesbaden in 1989 at age 70. Flight Sergeant Eric Wallace, No. 4 Group RAF, survived the January 1943 raid and was repatriated to Yorkshire in 1945. Wallace retrained as a radio technician and became an active member of the RAF Ex-Servicemen's Association. He worked for Marconi Limited and spent decades lecturing on radar technology. In a 1973 interview for the Imperial War Museum, Wallace recalled, "With the new set, we felt a step ahead, but no one predicted it would change the entire campaign so swiftly." He reunited with fellow crew members at No. 4 Group reunions through 1980. His oral testimony is archived at the IWM, London. Wallace died in Leeds in 1996, age 75. The Berlin Air Raid Memorial, dedicated at Tempelhof on May 8, 1985, features a bronze relief depicting radar operators at their consoles and lists both aircrew and ground staff lost on January 30, 1943. Annual ceremonies held each May attract approximately 900 attendees, with the 75th anniversary in 2018 attended by surviving descendants of both RAF and Luftwaffe personnel. The German Air Force's Führungsakademie incorporates the Berlin engagement into its electronic warfare training to highlight both technological adaptation and doctrinal inertia. In 1989, the Bundeswehr adopted decentralized night fighter command protocols based in part on lessons from the event, now standard for all Luftwaffe air defense units. The RAF Museum, London and Bundesarchiv collectively maintain over 1,500 document files and 84 oral testimonies from this raid. Contemporary military analysts point to tactical innovations shaped by this engagement. The failings of sector-locked radar defense spurred restructuring enabling decentralized command, which was implemented by the Bundeswehr in 1990. British Royal Air Force doctrine adopted dynamic airborne electronic countermeasure integration by 1992, directly referencing the Berlin raid in Staff College syllabi. Issues with early radar valves during the 1943 engagement prompted new reliability standards culminating in the introduction of fail-safe modular components for airborne radar, first fielded in the Eurofighter program in 2003. Tempelhof's memorial site now hosts annual international seminars, with over 3,000 visitors per year studying the evolving legacy of radar warfare.